scrapyard floated in orbit around a dying red star. For centuries, it had been the resting place of broken ships, their twisted bodies drifting in silence. Some had been warships, others cargo carriers, and a few had been proud flagships of mighty empires. Now all of them were nothing more than rusting corpses. Among the wreckage lay a once feared battleship, known long ago as Vorax Pride. It was massive, larger than most of the other hulks nearby. Its hull was cracked in many places, its weapons torn away, and its main engine dead. For years it had been considered useless. The alien empire that built it, the Karathi, had abandoned it after declaring it beyond repair. Scavengers from many races visited the scrapyard. They took parts from smaller ships or stripped metal for trade, but none of them touched Vorax Pride. They mocked it whenever it came into view, calling it a metal coffin or a ghost ship. Some said it was cursed. Others said its systems were so complex that even the greatest engineers had failed to bring it back to life. And so, for decades, the battleship remained silent. One day, a new worker arrived at the scrapyard. His name was Elias Carter, and unlike most who came there, he was human. Humans were still seen as newcomers in the galaxy. The older races considered them primitive, useful mostly for basic repairs or heavy labor. Humans lacked the long history of science that the alien empires had, but Elias was different. He was not a soldier or a merchant. He was a mechanic. Since his youth, he had loved broken things. He had grown up fixing old engines on Earth, rebuilding machines from scrap and creating tools when none existed. To him, a broken machine was not trash. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved. When Elias first saw the scrapyard, he felt excitement. Ships from 100 worlds were piled here like forgotten toys. But when his eyes fell on Vorax Pride, his heart stopped. The ship's broken body drifted with slow dignity, like a dead giant that still refused to bow. The other workers laughed when they saw him staring. "Don't waste your time, human," said a four-armed trader. "That ship has been dead longer than you've been alive." "It's a tomb," said another alien, her scales shimmering in the dim light. "Many tried. All failed. You will fail too." Elias didn't answer. His eyes studied the ship's scars. The others saw death, but he saw possibilities. The first time he entered Vorax Pride, the corridors were cold and dark. Dust floated in the air. Broken wires hung from the ceilings like vines. The smell of rust and old oil filled the chambers. Most people would have turned back immediately, but Elias smiled. "This ship isn't dead," he whispered to himself. "It's just waiting for the right hands." With only a basic toolkit and a small drone, he began his work. He mapped the ship's corridors, marked which systems were truly destroyed and which were only disconnected, and started testing the old circuits. The first week was nothing but silence and frustration. Whole sections of the ship refused to respond. Power conduits were shattered. The main core was locked with alien codes no human had ever read. Any ordinary worker would have given up. But Elias kept working. He stripped wires from smaller wrecks and replaced broken circuits. He repaired panels by hand, building parts out of scrap metal. He rewrote small pieces of code, guessing their meaning through trial and error. Each day he worked alone, crawling through vents, digging through debris, his hands stained with oil and burns. Slowly, tiny signs of life returned. A single hallway light flickered one evening. Another day, a broken console showed faint symbols. The ship was whispering back to him, weak but alive. When the other workers saw this, they were shocked. The human made the ghost light up. One alien shouted. "It's a trick," said another. "The power will fail again soon." But the light stayed on. Elias did not stop. His days turned into weeks. His body grew thin, his eyes heavy with lack of sleep, but his hands never rested. He felt a strange bond with the ship. Whenever he touched its walls, he felt as if the old machine was watching him, waiting for him to succeed. One night, deep inside the engineering chamber, Elias sat cross-legged with his tools spread around him. Before him stood the broken power core of Vorax Pride. It was enormous, built with technology far beyond anything on Earth. To the Karathi, it had been a failure. To Elias, it was a challenge. He touched the blackened surface of the core and whispered, "Let's see what you're hiding." For hours, he studied the ruined parts. The design made no sense at first. The systems were layered in strange patterns, as if the builders had tried too hard to make it perfect. Then Elias noticed something strange. Redundant circuits hidden beneath the main ones. The Karathi engineers had dismissed these as useless. Elias realized they were backup paths, overlooked by their overconfidence. Piece by piece, he rerouted power through those hidden channels. Sparks flew. Smoke filled the chamber and his hands burned from the heat. But at last, the core gave a low, deep hum. For the first time in decades, Vorac's pride began to breathe. The sound echoed through the dead ship. Lights came alive across the corridors. Doors unlocked, consoles lit with symbols. The great warship, silent for so long, stirred awake. When Elias walked back into the scrapyard docks, sweat dripping from his face, the entire place was staring. Workers, traders, scavengers, everyone had gathered to watch the ghost ship glow in the distance. "He did it," whispered someone. "No, impossible. Humans can't do that," muttered another. But no one could deny the truth. The once-dead battleship now shone with new light. From that day, Elias was no longer just a simple mechanic in the scrapyard. He was the human who dared to touch what no one else would, the one who had woken the forgotten giant. Yet Elias knew the work was far from finished. The ship's weapons were still broken, the engines damaged, and the core unstable. It was only the beginning. Still, as he looked at the glowing hull of Vorac's pride, Elias felt a surge of pride. He had taken the first step in bringing the dead back to life, and deep within the ship's system something stirred. The battleship seemed to recognize him, almost as if it had been waiting all these years for a human's stubborn hands to make it whole again. The legend had just begun. The glow of Vorac's pride lit up the scrapyard like a second sun. Aliens stopped their work and stared. None had ever seen a human do what Elias Carter had done. To them it was impossible. A human had touched the dead and made it live again. But Elias did not look at the shocked faces. His eyes were on the ship's core. It hummed steadily, but it was not yet stable. He had awakened the giant, yes, but now he had to teach it to move, to fight, to be alive in a galaxy that had already forgotten it. He climbed back into the engineering chamber, checking the systems one by one. The engines were damaged, their fuel conduits blocked. The shields were offline, their power matrices broken. The weapons were stripped of their ammunition, their targeting systems scrambled. For most, this would have been discouraging. For Elias, it was just another puzzle. He started with the engines. Using spare parts from smaller ships and scraps he had collected, he rewrote the engine code line by line. Each correction caused small explosions and sparks, but the engines slowly came alive. First a low rumble, then a steady vibration throughout the hull. Vorac's pride was beginning to feel alive. Next were the weapons. The main cannons were ancient, the technology unfamiliar. Elias studied the schematics, comparing the alien design with human engineering methods he had learned on Earth. With careful hands, he repaired the targeting systems, rerouted energy channels, and created new ammunition from raw materials. By the end of the third week, the weapons could fire, though at low power. The shields were the hardest. The original system had been sabotaged, leaving it vulnerable to complete failure. But Elias did not give up. He spent nights in the control room writing code, connecting power loops, and adjusting the flow of energy. Eventually, the shields hummed, a shimmering field surrounding the hull like a protective bubble. Vorac's pride was no longer just alive. It was awakening as a true warship. As the news spread, aliens from the scrapyard and nearby systems came to see the miracle. Many were angry. They had always known the ship was worthless, and now a human had proven them wrong. Some tried to claim it. Traders and scavengers approached, offering credits or demanding ownership. Elias shook his head. "This ship answers only to me," he said firmly. "It has no master but the one who revived it." The aliens laughed at first, thinking it a joke. But when Vorac's pride's main engine roared to life, sending a wave of energy that lit the docks and threw some bystanders to the ground, they fell silent. The ghost ship had become a living legend in front of their eyes. It was then that Elias discovered the truth about the sabotage. While scanning the core for hidden damage, he found evidence of deliberate interference. The Karathi engineers had not just abandoned the ship, they had tried to destroy it. The code showed sabotage deep inside the main core. If repaired incorrectly, it would have exploded. The weapon systems were rigged to fail. The engines were designed to shut down under high stress. The Karathi had feared their own creation. They had built a ship so powerful that it could have turned the tide of countless wars, and then they had rejected it out of fear. Elias smiled grimly. "You were wrong," he whispered to the ship. "You were not meant to die. You were meant to rise." He spent days carefully undoing the sabotage, restoring what had been broken on purpose. The process was slow and dangerous. At any wrong move, the ship could have destroyed itself. But Elias worked tirelessly. He was patient, precise, and stubborn, qualities the aliens underestimated in humans. By the end of the month, Vorac's Pride was fully functional. Its engines could outrun any pursuing ship. Its shields were stronger than any vessel of similar size. Its weapons could strike with deadly accuracy, using energy patterns no one else had ever seen. It was no longer just a recovered ship. It was better than the original. Elias had taken alien design, human ingenuity, and improvisation to create something new, something no one could have predicted. Word reached nearby systems that a human had revived a legendary Karathi battleship. Fear and curiosity spread quickly. Pirates and rival factions tried to attack the scrapyard, hoping to claim the ship before Elias left. They were not prepared. When the first fleet of raiders arrived, Vorac's Pride roared to life. Energy lances fired, shields deflected missiles, and engines propelled the ship with incredible speed. Elias piloted it himself, feeling the ship respond to his commands as if it understood him perfectly. In one swift battle, he destroyed the raiders' fleet. No one had ever seen a single pilot defeat so many ships at once. The galaxy began to take notice. Aliens whispered in fear and amazement. "The human—" "He did what none of us could," they said. "He brought the dead to life." Elias did not care about the praise or fear. He was already planning the next step, exploration. Vorac's Pride was no longer trapped in the scrapyard. It could travel to distant systems, discover unknown technologies, and protect humanity's place in the galaxy. As he prepared for the first voyage, Elias walked through the ship one last time. The corridors no longer smelled of rust and decay. Lights shone brightly. Panels displayed data he could understand. The ship felt alive, like a creature with a mind of its own. He paused at the main hall and placed his hand on the wall. "We've come far," he said softly, "but this is only the beginning." Vorac's Pride seemed to hum in agreement. The day Elias finally left the scrapyard, the aliens watched in awe. The useless ship sailed out into the stars, piloted by a human who had dared to dream. Traders whispered, soldiers stared, and pirates shivered. A legend had begun, and it was not just a story about a ship. It was a story about humanity. Humans were underestimated, often ignored, and sometimes laughed at. But in the hands of Elias Carter, humanity had taken what others abandoned and made it something greater than anyone imagined. The galaxy had never seen a human mechanic like him, and it would never forget Vorac's Pride. As the stars stretched before him, Elias smiled. There were challenges ahead, enemies lurking in unknown systems and mysteries waiting to be discovered. But he was ready. Together with the ship, humanity's ingenuity had proven that even the impossible could be achieved. For the first time in history, a rejected starship had become a living legend. And a human had written its name across the stars.